What's up, guys? Welcome into All Tied Up. It is your co-host, Chris Marler, joined by my good friend and other co-host, Clint Lamb. Clint, how you doing, man?
Good friend. We're friends. We're all right. I'm just kidding. I'm doing great, man. How you doing, brother?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Crazy week, man. Just a crazy week. I said this last week. I kept thinking everything would slow down, right? Like everything would slow down. Like we'll get the season's over. We have the SEC championship. That's about it. And then nothing has slowed down. The portal has been insane. There's all this, just a lot of chatter about the portal in general, and then targets and different needs, I think, from like all around the SEC. And it's just been interesting because there's 1,800 players. I think there's over 1,800 players as of last night. We're recording this on Friday. As of last night on Thursday, there were 1,800 players that were in the portal. Even crazier than that, man, is that I think it was like 1,597 total or something like that were in by Monday, which is just insane.
It's a lot of people. Yeah. And I mean, it's navigating. Here's the thing too. You now no longer kind of have the walk-on spots, right? Everybody can technically be scholarship. So there will be like better players that, and this is nothing against walk-ons at all. Nothing. But when you have the ability to pay somebody's way, you can afford to bring more guys on. It won't necessarily be, not saying they're going to be a bunch of, 4 stars and 5 stars all the way through, but, you'll be maybe get some guys that were, wanting to maybe walk on, but they didn't want to handle the financial side of it.
Right.
You'll give them the opportunity. Your depth should be, and I say depth is in like the very back of your roster. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference as far as game days, but you will be able to take some chances, more chances on some developmental players, in my opinion. That should present a lot of opportunities for kids as far as, when you're getting all those extra scholarships. That's going to affect things. But I will say, is there been who's probably been the biggest surprise to you, whether it be coming from Alabama as far as the guys who have entered, or maybe is there a player from somewhere else where you're like, man, I'm really shocked that guy entered the portal? Or has it kind of been par for the course? You're like, really nothing shocks me at this point.
So I don't know if anything shocks me at this point. I will tell you that Jackson Arnold is the one that stands out the most to me, that you watch this and you're like, what are we doing?
Like as far as the attention he's getting, or just him entering in general?
So I was going to say this for later, but let's just do it now. Jackson Arnold may very well be a great quarterback. Like he's just a freshman in his first season starting, and this is a total overreaction. Even if that's true, the market for the transfer portal has been so skewed already. Like I was telling somebody about this the other day. Do you remember when the portal, or I'm sorry, when NIL started? It was like July 1st, 2021, or like I think it was around then. Because I remember Bo Nix at midnight made his announcement that he was with Milo's T. And then De'Aaron King, the quarterback at Miami at the time, got a $20,000 deal with College Hunk Movers. And I was like so shocked that College Hunk Movers had $20,000 in their marketing budget to give to him, for one. And then two, like I was like, man, that's a decent amount of money. Like $20,000 is nothing cheap. And now you look at it a couple of years later, and I think Matt Rule said this last year, the market value for quarterbacks in the portal is between $1 and $1.5 million. It's just kind of set at that. And now you're seeing this kind of mirroring situation where in the NFL, the 3 highest paid positions, and receiver is getting there, but the 3 highest paid position is quarterback, left tackle, edge rusher. Like the quarterback, protecting the quarterback, getting to the quarterback. Those are the 3 biggest things and 3 highest paid positions. So you kind of expect to see that in the portal, and that's fine. But Jackson Arnold, who's a former 5-star, is leaving Oklahoma. He's already pushed out basically Dillon Gabriel, who was there. They felt at least good enough that they didn't need to go spend any more money on Dillon Gabriel being there because they had Jackson Arnold. He started 9 games. I'm not saying it's a finished product. What I am saying is him entering the portal made sense to me because it wasn't a great situation. They got a new OC. Maybe he's gonna bring his quarterback with him, which everyone expects him to do, from Washington State. So Mississippi State is an understandable landing spot because Levy's there, who was his old OC. Auburn is also in the mix. But Mississippi State, Clint, had a good, serviceable freshman quarterback who, by all means, put up better numbers and performed better than Jackson Arnold did. And so now Arnold's in. He's a top 4 player, apparently, in the entire portal, like for this window. And there are several reports that the teams like Auburn and teams like Mississippi State are in a bidding war of around $1 to $1.2 million for a guy that, again, not the finished product, but the results on the field should have to matter to an extent. I'm just confused as to what, like, over $1 million for a quarterback that was last in the SEC or second to last in the SEC in almost every single major passing statistical category seems like a stretch.
I would agree with that. I think the desperation for a quarterback, like the NFL tries to do it too, because you're kind of stuck in limbo. Now, the difference between college and the NFL is if you're bad enough, you just embrace the suck, to be honest with you, and you try to, position yourself for a better draft pick. In college football, that's not really the case. If you're terrible, there's no such thing as tanking. There's no reason to. So, it's a different approach. I am surprised, like Jackson Arnold, I think one of his big question marks was the turnovers.
Yeah.
And, that was even before we saw him play anything significant or meaningful this year. That was kind of always been kind of his thing. And then you just kind of see it in real time. And it was a problem at times. I mean, It got to a point where they were, and granted, weapons has a lot to do with it. And the fact that all those guys were injured for Oklahoma, that's going to impact things as well. But it reached a point where you saw the game plan, against Alabama, where they're throwing the football 11 times. Now, granted, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Alabama never put them in a position where they really had to do any different. But, it is a different approach compared to, maybe what you would have expected for a former 5-star who was at Oklahoma, who they had kind of committed to. And here's the thing about it. When you get these guys, not only are you paying them, but it's also, what did Nick Saban say when he retired? It was all about 2 things when he was interviewing players postseason. It was, how much are you going to give me, and how can you guarantee me playing time?
Right.
So the money side of it is there for a lot of these young star quarterbacks that are getting brought in, but I think some of them expect to compete in year one. Maybe a guy like Jackson Arnold did. Maybe, I don't remember exactly what the timeline was for Dillon Gabriel, but it's possible that they got Jackson Arnold and then they signed Dillon Gabriel out of the transfer portal, and maybe, he was upset about that. I don't know, but you're certainly, unless you're Arch Manning or, Ty Simpson, who was just, I guess, a little bit true NIL and transfer portal, guys aren't willing to sit around and wait a long time. So it could have been possible that Jackson Arnold was like, hey, either I get some assurances that I'm going to be the starting quarterback in 2024 or I'm going to enter the transfer portal. Maybe they didn't view him as ready, but they're like, we got to get him ready because we don't want to lose out on a guy who could be here for the next 2 to 3 years for, Dillon Gabriel for another season. And Dillon Gabriel really hadn't done anything that spectacular for Oklahoma. Right. So I think that was the dilemma. And they're not going to be the only program that faces that problem. But, that's something interesting to consider with the whole situation, Chris.
No, I agree. Here's the thing, though, too. Sorry, I just got this thing about Clemson might be targeting a defensive player for the first time, which would be crazy. And obviously the show is about Bama. We're not here to talk about Oklahoma and Auburn and stuff like that, but it is the week where all these names are in the portal. And I think it speaks to like a bigger, not concern, but like in-house, I feel like it's a concern. Like in-house, you trying to come up with I saw Brad Crawford posted the expected NIL numbers, right, from the other day. And I saw the expected numbers or whatever, and it was like, LSU, I think it was like at 20 million. You had a couple guys that were at 20 million. And those numbers I can confirm, at least for one of those schools, is completely off base. So I think this idea that like Ohio State spent 20 million on their roster, that's fair. Like that's an accurate number. We've like seen that. There's other schools that have spent around like 15 million that are like that as well. But my point is, if you like, not all these schools, including Alabama, have this like abundance of cash just for football that we're spending $15 million a year on a roster, and the $1 million for a player like a Jackson Arnold, that is going to be between 10 and 20% of your entire like spending money. And it just really, really highlights the fact that this is the day and age of college football now, where it's like you have got to figure out a way You've got to figure out a way to make sure that you don't miss. Like, this is not the days like of old where it's like, who's that running back Bama had? Brent Callaway, the 5-star running back, like
from Russell.
Right. You missed him. And it's like, okay, well, whatever. You still got all these other players, right? Like, you got all these other 5-stars. If you miss on a 5-star, you can't just go out necessarily and get another one, because it's not a scholarship that you're missing that frees up. It's a large portion of what is now a salary cap and your like your overall budget and roster that you're trying to put together. Like, you can't afford to miss. And what worries me the most, and this is like this part we don't have to get into, what worries me the most is you're going to be knocking on doors to these boosters, asking for money, asking for figuring out how, like, hey, what do we, like, we need you to keep digging into those pockets because we want to go get this kid. You're going to find boosters that are going to go out and go get kids and basically give you the money you asked for so you can go get one of these players. And if those kids don't pan out, it's going to be hard to go back to that same door and say, like, hey, need you again.
Imagine the guy who, or maybe it's multiple, who gave the money for DJ Uiagalelei. Imagine having to go back to that cat and say, hey, I need more money, because that obviously was a big swing and miss. And
right.
And also, who's to say that there aren't certain people who are, what if it's, let's say I'm a big power player as far as money and donating it and having a huge hand in, Auburn's NIL, collective or fund or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Imagine me having my own personal thoughts. Like, hey, I think Jackson Arnold, a former 5-star, would be better than, this other player. And so I'm not going to give you money to go sign him, but I'll give you money to go sign him. Like, what if you're trying
to? And in Auburn, that's like a very real thing.
I mean, I feel like
of boosters.
I mean, if you don't think that's that, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Steve Sarkisian has the power to avoid that sort of thing with their decision makers or higher ups, but that's been a huge problem at Texas as far as them meddling and wanting to try to make some of these coaching type decisions. It's a big reason why Nick Saban was, very reluctant when that was a big thing. But that's all of this is just kind of managing or lingering as far as college football, how people are managing it. And the more you swing and miss, like Ohio State, let's say they fall short. And really, even if I would say the bare minimum is making the national championship.
Yep.
Winning probably is where people would say it was worth it. If you make it, though, I think people would say, well, we swung for the fences. We came up literally just short. But you know what? We'll probably keep swinging. But let's say they come up really short. Let's say, Ole Miss and the way that they tried to spin, and they're trying to do it again. And I guarantee you the pitch right now is, hey, we need multiple of these classes, these transfer portal classes. If you can give us a 2 or 3 of them, we'll get over the top. We'll get this thing done. If you don't do it, if you continue to fall short, it's going to become that much more difficult. Jimbo Fisher, the amount of money that he was able to get really when everything was just getting started, got the best high school recruiting class, quote unquote, on paper of all time, and it fell way short. And it did nothing but cause problems. So there's so much that people were trying to figure out. I know we've spent, close to 15 minutes already on this. I want to talk about Alabama. That's what we're here to do. And this does relate to Alabama. They got a lot going on with the transfer portal. Kevin Concepcion, he's on campus. Patrick Cooties, I think, Cooties, I think is how you pronounce it. Like, he's got Cooties.
Yeah.
He ended up committing.
That's right.
He ended up committing to Ole Miss. He never made it to Alabama's campus. Offensive lineman from Arkansas. That was one, when you looked at the tape and stuff, had some athleticism, had some positional flexibility or versatility, where it's like, okay, he can help at guard, he could help at tackle. So that was an unfortunate one, but there's a lot of players that Alabama's going after right now. Here's what I want to ask before we kind of get into that side of it. The quarterback situation. Jalen Milroe, he didn't say that he was declaring for the draft, or he didn't say he was transferring elsewhere, but when he was asked about the 2025 quarterback room, he was making comments like those guys are going to have a lot, great opportunity. Just made it seem like that he will be leaving after this year. We don't know what the next stop will be. I assume it's the NFL, but that's pure speculation on my part right now. But a lot of people are asking about this quarterback room, with him potentially leaving. Dylan Lonergan has entered the transfer portal. He's being connected to Bill O'Brien and Boston College. We'll have to see how that plays out. But, what do you think about Alabama's quarterback room right now? And do you think that they need to target anybody, quote unquote, in the transfer portal?
No, because you got Keelon Russell coming in, so I'm not super worried about that. You still got that Mack kid, Austin Mack, coming in from from Washington. You need four players, so maybe you need to go get one like lower level guy for like depth, whatever. Here's the thing I'm going to urge Bama fans to do. One, shut up about Jalen Milroe on social media. Just stop. Like just stop. Like he did not play well over his last several games. It's totally fine to be critical of that, and he should have played better. He did not have the same season he did last year and all that kind of stuff. But I tell you what, when that kid ends up being a high round draft pick, maybe a first round draft pick. Now let's remember, like after the Georgia game, he was projected to go number 1 overall. That clearly has changed, but he is going to go to the combine. He is going to wow people with his arm. They're going to think that they can fix the accuracy, and then he's going to line up and run the 40 and run a 4.3. And he is going to solidify himself as a first round pick because they're going to see the athleticism, the size, and he's going to go to the Underwear Olympics and be one of the most physically impressive players there. First round quarterbacks do not grow on trees. They do not grow on trees. They might at times in Alabama, but you think about the way that like the fall off from Bryce to Jalen, like, and I thought Jalen was great at times. This idea that you want to rush out Jalen Milroe so you can open up the door for Ty Simpson is kind of insane to me. And I like Ty Simpson, but like, there's no part of me that thinks that we got to get this kid out of here. Like people are saying that with Ewers for Arch Manning, and I don't even think Ewers that good, but like, I'm telling you, it is. The grass isn't always greener. Like maybe Ty Simpson.
Oklahoma's learned that, right?
Right. Like the first thing we talked about, like it's a great point. Like that's this idea that, oh my God, the backup, that's who we need. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, if the backup was that good, probably would have played a little bit more. Probably would have played a little bit more with all the struggles that Jalen had. Like we're not on the coaching staff, and I guarantee you, if there was this much of a friction in a division, between, like what was going on with Jalen and the coaching staff and him running in their system, Ty Simpson might have been involved a little bit more. So I just think that you should just hesitate or like be more hesitant and mindful of what you currently have. It might not have been great. The other part of it too, man, is if you're going to sit here and think that Jalen Milroe is the only reason that this team didn't win more games, that part is stupid. I had somebody on Twitter say yesterday, they were like, yeah, well, I mean, like in the games they lost, it was his fault. Like that Vandy, he threw a pick 6 and that we lost by 5. And it was like, first off, that pick 6 was not worth 40 points. And that's how many points that the defense gave up. He could get better. I think he should probably go to the NFL because I think that I don't know how much more he could put on tape that's going to show how much better he is. I wonder if they go, how involved Keelon Russell would be in year 1. Because we have seen quarterbacks for the most part that are huge freshman recruits be able to go into the first year in the SEC and play, right? Like they don't always blow the doors off people. We've also seen other situations where it's like, all right, they've waited and then got their time and then those had success too. I don't know how involved Austin Mack is in the offense. There's some people that think he could be great, and he obviously, DeBoer was mindful enough to bring him along with him. Like, what do you think?
Okay.
I'm gonna adjust this chair.
First of all, I understand where people are coming from. Mm-hmm. Who, at this point, it is pretty evident to me that he's kind of is who he is. I'm not saying he can't continue to make improvement, but what you're also doing is you're also continuing to give other teams more film on you.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, it did feel like later on this season, more defenses started figuring him out and then figuring out Alabama's offense. And the counters that are supposed to come to that, and people will blame that on the offensive coordinator, and it might be. But it could also be that those counters couldn't be made because Jalen didn't have the ability to make some of those counter moves. And so I want that to be kind of something that's on the minds of everyone. I also think that when you look at what he provided the offense, here's why I think this is why I thought he was definitely gone. I kind of have assumed it for most of this, process as far as you start getting into talking about the transfer portal and the signing class and all that stuff. Well, the comments that Kalen DeBoer made about the offense, about how the receivers, how unselfish they were playing in this style of offense that really didn't feature them. I don't think he makes that kind of comment because is indirectly criticizing Milroe, even though it was not his intention at all. People are going to take that and they're going to, run with it. They're going to read between the lines. If they were planning to continue to run that style of offense because they weren't sure if Jalen was coming back or whatever, then I don't think he makes that comment, if I'm speaking candidly. So I thought that was a huge tell. This is obviously a huge, huge tell. It is not a definitive answer, but I just don't think he's going to be back in 2025.
Yeah,
now, when you look at, I've been asked the question a ton. Okay, you lose Dylan Lonergan, you're probably losing Jalen Milroe. What does it look like as far as the rest of the quarterback room? And do you bring in someone from the transfer portal? I think that's an interesting question because what you're lacking is playing experience. But from a setup of your quarterback room, everything else is kind of there unless you want four arms. Unless that's the case, I mean, you're going to kind of continue with, you've got Ty Simpson, who has been in the system for a while. And so he doesn't have the playing experience, but he's got time in the system, at least a year under DeBoer, and he's done the whole college thing. He's played a little bit, gotten his feet wet a little bit. So, I think that from that standpoint, he's a Garrett Nussmeier-esque.
Right.
And then you look behind him. What you don't want to do is bring in a quarterback who's probably going to want to play or going to want to compete. And then, that guy ends up being the backup and not Keelon Russell. When you've got a player like, think of Nico Iamaleava or, Bryce Young, when he came in, he almost immediately let Paul Tyson for the number 2 spot. If you've got that phenom that you're kind of trying to groom or get them ready, you want them getting all the reps, whether it be in practice or in games that you can possibly get them. And I think that I love Austin Mack too. I think he's got a lot of potential, but I think pretty much everybody can agree. More than likely, if I had to guess how it's going to look in 2025, I think it's going to be Ty Simpson.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be Keelon Russell being the number 2, getting all those mop-up duty reps, getting the number 2 reps in practice. Austin Mack will have opportunities. I'm not saying that he won't, but I just think that's the setup. And I think if you bring in a transfer portal player, that throws a wrench into all of that. So you would really need to get the right guy who is just, he would be totally fine being the number 3, maybe even the number 4, depending on Austin Mack.
Right.
And I just don't know if there's anybody out there that's worth getting. Now, you might get post-spring and decide that you want to go in a different direction because you don't like how things are currently, trending as far as your guys. But I think as far as pre-spring, there's no reason to bring anybody else in. Numbers, obviously having 3, you're a little bit short. That is concerning. But I think they would probably stick with what they've got and at least go through spring ball.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
So, I mean, he is playing in the bowl game. Jalen Milroe is.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
So I think that one of the things I love most about what DeBoer has already brought in is the culture hasn't changed with it. And I think that, like, anytime you look at the bowl games and the opt-outs, part of you are like, okay, that's kind of cool. You get to see like the other guys that, like, behind that they're, your second and third string guys in the future or whatever. But I love the fact that like Milroe saying he was playing wasn't surprising to me.
It wasn't.
Jahad Campbell saying like hell yeah, I'm playing was like that lit me up. I was fired up about that. I think that like it showed me a couple things that, like, we talked about this. I talked about it a lot. There was times this year where it didn't feel like there was a ton of pride that was being shown in that locker room. And what it showed me is that I was probably wrong about that to an extent about some of the guys, because there's still a core group of players in there where like the A, on the center of that jersey and the logo and the name on the front of the jersey versus the back, as they say, is way more important still. And it was cool to see guys like Jahad Campbell. I mean, really, man, there's nothing to play for some of these guys, right? Like there's like in terms of like this season, like this is like the first time since 2010 you've had 3 losses in a season. And that 2010 game, you had a ton of people coming back before you played Michigan State. You had a ton of people coming back for the next year. This day and age is different. So it's like you don't know who else coming back. You don't know. I mean, I would assume Campbell will go to the NFL. I'm not sure, but I think I'm excited to see where they go from here. And if they can get a couple of those guys back, I think that would be massive for DeBoer.
Well, I mean, Parker Brailsford announcing that he's coming back. That is absolutely huge from a schematic sense. You're trying to get this Kalen DeBoer offense more so in his image than it was in year one. And that's not just a Jalen Milroe thing. I don't think Jalen Milroe is the perfect fit schematically, but it's the offensive line looks a little bit different, even though you love those guys and love how they've battled the tight end position and the fact that they have not been super big pass catching threats.
Right.
That's, something to look at. The guys who can't really do the stuff underneath and create the spacing and separation needed underneath to really open up the offense, the guys who are going to be able to be dynamic after the catch on screens. Like, how big has the screen game been for Alabama this year? It really hadn't been there much, and that was one of the big things that Keelon DeBoer did at Washington was the creativity with his screen game and the variety with it and the way he can throw so many different things at you, and you just haven't seen any of this stuff. So, when you look at, like, Parker Brailsford and his decision to come back, you've got Caden Proctor coming back. We don't know about Jaden Roberts. He does have another year of eligibility if he wants to use it. We'll have to see what happens with Elijah Pritchett, but I would assume he's going to be back. Elijah Pritchett, Wilkin Formby. You've got a really good group of freshmen coming in who are going to be competing on the offensive line. But when you talk about the athleticism and the bulldog mentality and all that combination, Parker Brailsford, how he didn't end up being, all SEC. One of them.
What was that about?
I really don't know. I've said it once and I'll continue to say it's one of the most criminal things I've seen when it comes to postseason awards. I don't see how you could possibly have watched anything that he did and not think that he was phenomenal this season. But a lot of these people don't watch. So, that plays a factor. When you talk about Milroe, though, and just the guys who are playing, I give them a lot of credit. Because we saw what it looks like when you don't have that mentality as a team in a locker room. That was Florida State last year with the opt-outs and all that stuff. And we've seen where that program has gone since. The fact that you've still got these types of guys who are saying, nah, we started this thing together. We're going to finish this thing together. I think that, speaks volumes as far as those individual players, but also the locker room, how they approach things. It is different at a place like Alabama than it is at Florida State. I'm not trying to take a shot at Florida State, but you can look at it and see there's a major difference there.
Right. Yeah. All right, dude. Well, we'll be back I guess we'll be back Sunday. We'll be back. We got to get a regular routine going here. Maybe on Monday we'll get a check-in because I'm sure there'll be some commits this weekend. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stuff. It is a fire hose of information this week. It feels like it's finally starting to settle down a little bit, but now you're going to start getting this wave of commitments. And all that kind of good stuff. There's only one more regular season college football game this week. It's Army-Navy. And then we have the Heisman Trophy tomorrow as well, which will be, it's Travis Hunter's. So
do you agree with it?
So I will be honest, like this year, I covered the SEC, South Carolina, Bama, LSU, Georgia. Like that's where my focus has been. I have watched several Colorado games, like not necessarily in its entirety, but like I think Travis Hunter's great. I think the stuff is great. I think what I don't like is like Ashton Jeanty has put up a ridiculous season. The top two guys that you have, no one's really watched. Like down here at least, like consistently. And I think it's just a weird year because we haven't watched a lot of those games. I've realized very frustrated about how 2018 went because 2018, Tua was he wasn't as much of a favorite. I think he was like minus 1,400, minus 1,200 going into the final weekend. But by all means, the Heisman was his to lose. Travis Hunter, if you bet $100 on him as of last week to win the Heisman, you win $4, right? I think Tua is going into the SEC championship was like you bet 100, you win 10. Like it was minus 1,000 versus minus 2,500 or whatever. I don't agree with the fact that how much of this is a what have you done for me lately event for voters and for people. Like you saw it last week with Cam Scadaboo. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, Cam Scadaboo, like he's got to be in the Heisman conversation. It's like, why? Like, have you watched him all year and he has great numbers? Or is it because he's the only game on right now and we're all watching it together
and he's doing amazing things.
He's having a great game. And I think he is a good player and he may be deserving of being there. I think I just get so frustrated with the prisoner mentality or prisoner of the moment mentality that voters have with the Heisman.
Yeah, and what's wild is like when you look at like the Heisman preseason Heisman odds, a lot of SEC quarterbacks falling short is what created what we're seeing now, right? Yeah. Carson Beck was certainly up there. Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Nico Iamaleava. Iamaleava was one everybody was like, dude, that's my guy. And especially when you started the season, the first couple of games and how he looked. You know, Connor Weigman was one who was kind of in that conversation. I mean, you had Dylan Gabriel, and he's kind of been as advertised. He was certainly up there. Cam Ward has lived up to, you know, preseason. Garrett Nussmeier was another one. He had the same odds going in as Cam Ward and Riley Leonard for Notre Dame. It's just what's wild is this year it took an insane amount of quarterbacks kind of falling short of expectations to create a situation where you've got a two-way player and a running back as like those are the only two guys that really matter.
Right. That part is very odd. So
yeah, that's pretty crazy. So all right, man. I appreciate you. We'll talk more about the Heisman on Sunday, I'm sure.
Yeah, that sounds good, man.
There's going to be, hopefully, we're talking about a lot of different things. We're going to keep our Sunday tradition going. Appreciate you taking the time. Appreciate everybody who hopped in here and watched the video. If you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go to covercrimson.com. Sign up for the message board. A lot of discussion happening over there as far as the visitors and what Alabama's got going on. And we're breaking down, keeping up with the roster tracker and all that. But also, go to mybookie.ag, 300% deposit match on the casino side of things. So definitely go check that out. Use the promo code next round. Make sure that you do that. That helps us way more than you could possibly know. And once again, Chris, appreciate you. Appreciate it, everybody else. And we will be back doing this again soon.